Hello again. I was heartened this week, as I'm sure most of us were, to hear the applause for the NHS on Thursday evening. What a marvellous job they're doing. And I'm encouraged when I'm out and about to see so many rainbows chalked on pavements, coloured in and stuck into windows as an indication of hope, a sign of hope. Now, in recent years, that rainbow colours has been appropriated for other means, and I make no comment on that. But with so many rainbows surrounding us all, it's good to remind ourselves that the rainbow is a symbol of hope, and remind ourselves of the story that it came from in the first place, the story from the Bible. Now, if those of you who are of a scientific mind will know that a rainbow is formed when there's moisture in the atmosphere and the sun shines through that moisture and it splits the light into its various wavelengths, which we see as colour. It's a phenomenon of a weather event. But it's also a promise from God. Long time ago, there was a flood, and God decided to destroy most of his world. But he didn't destroy his creation completely. He knew a man called Noah, who was a good man, and he instructed him to build a boat. You've probably heard the story. You might even have played with an ark as a child. And we tend to think of it as just a children's story, but it's a story of hope. And God instructed Noah to put sufficient numbers of animals into the ark from every species of every creature to start all over again. God wasn't destroying his creation, but he did want to start again. And you will know the story that it rained for 40 days. And even after it stopped raining and the ark was floating, it floated for even longer than that. But eventually God brought the ark safely to ground, and the water started to dry up. And after a long time in what must have been a very smelly boat by then, Noah and his family were allowed out by God. And God made a promise to Noah. I've got my Bible here. And the promise says, "I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease." Noah and his family had seen everything that they'd known taken away, covered up, destroyed, or so he thought. But when he was released from the boat, he thanked God for saving him. He worshipped God. And he remembered that God is still God. God is still sovereign over all the earth. And God made a promise with him. He calls it a covenant. He says, "This is the sign of the covenant, the promise that I make between me and you," that's God and Noah, "and all future generations. I've set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant, the promise between me and the earth." The promise that God will never destroy the earth again. The promise that God will always be God, that he will always be sovereign. If you are out and about, if you see those rainbow pictures coloured in by children and adults alike, if you see them chalked on the pavement and stuck up in windows, just remind yourself of the story that it came from in the first place. A story of hope, a story of a promise from God, even when we know the science behind that sign in the sky. Because I wonder if you, like me, have seen a lot of rainbows in the sky in the first 3 months of this year. Now, we could be perfectly rational and perfectly right and say this is because the weather has been particularly wet and it's also been sunny at the same time, There have been a lot of rainbows. But it was also an opportunity for God to say, remember that covenant, remember that promise between you and me, the promise of hope and a new beginning, a promise that I will not destroy the earth, that I am still sovereign and I'm still your God. Next time you see a rainbow, wherever it may be, a drawn one or one in the sky, remember that covenant promise with God. Keep safe.